Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to this first impressions walkthrough of Witches of Legend, an oracle deck by Anabelle Lewis. I am really excited to get into this deck. Now, the Witches of Legend Oracle deck was one that was sent to me by a generous member of our community so that I could do a walkthrough, and I'm really excited to get a peek at it. I haven't really, it hasn't really been on my radar, actually. I think this came out as a Kickstarter, and I believe it's got a limited color palette. I think it's black and white. So we're going to dive into it, take a peek through the cards, and see what we see. But I'm really excited to actually get my eyeballs on it. I love just looking through new decks. It's one of my favorite things ever. So I'm pretty excited about it. And she was generous enough to send me, I'm guessing, the extra goodies that came in the Kickstarter. It came with a velvet bag, which has this same sort of eye symbol from the box on it. So that's really, really pretty. And then it also came with a spread cloth. Let's take a peek at this. Oh my gosh. Is that the Hermit's Lantern? Okay, I just made that up because this isn't even a tarot deck. But like, doesn't that remind you of like a Hermit's Lantern with an eye in the center? Look at that. So that's pretty. And it also seems to have come with a little pin, which I'm really excited about actually. So let's take a look at the little pin. So this feels like an enamel metal pin. It's really pretty. That actually reminds me of the goddess Newt or Nyx. I can't remember which one I'm thinking of, but really beautiful with the moon phases above. It's got this very goddess feeling for sure with the streaming hair. That's beautiful. Love that. I need to create a little, maybe I'll ask Peggy to help me at some point to create like basically like a hanging thing that I can stick all my pins on, because I've got quite a collection of really pretty pins and I'm not the type to wear them, but I would like to display them. So yeah, maybe I'll see if Peggy can whip something up for me, but let's just stick that right there for now. Okay, let's get into this. So it does come in a really nice sturdy box, and there's no thumb cutouts. It just says Witches of Legend all the way around. It's got this really pretty sort of gold foiling kind of reflectiveness happening, and then pretty plain on the back, but really pretty nice sturdy box. And then inside we have our guidebook, and then we have a little plastic tray where the cards sit. And let's take a look. So let me get the box out of the way here. Just pop it over there where it's not gonna reflect. I guess we'll stick it that side. You know what? Okay, I can't make up my mind where I'm gonna put the box. Let's just put it, that's good. Okay, put the guidebook up out of the way and take a look at the backings. Those are really pretty. The cards are glossy, so there is a decent amount of reflect on them. And they are gilded in a really pretty shiny gold. And here is essentially what we're looking at. So really nice black border, and it looks like, yeah, it's all black, white with touches of gold. It looks like through the artwork, with actually only a little bit of gold. Sort of here and there, just like little accents. Oh my gosh, that's pretty. Okay, so we're gonna go through these one at a time, but that is essentially what we're looking at. I think I might want to refer to the guidebook as we go through, because this seems to feature all sort of divine feminine sort of figures. And I think I might want to just read a little bit about the intention behind this deck before we dive in. So let's just see. Ah, here we go. This deck was born of a history nerd, a history nerd's insatiable quest for some witchy knowledge. The figures I chose for the deck come from my research into texts such as the Odyssey, the Enuma Elish, the Voluspa, and the Book of Taliesin, as well as folk tales like the Arthurian legends. There are many oracle decks in the world, and I want to thank you deeply for choosing the Witches of Legend deck, whether it's your first and only or part of a wonderful collection. The goddesses and historical figures who make up this deck have all become important figures in my life, and I hope that they will guide you as much as they have me. And then she talks a little bit about there's a, if you have a preferred ritual to welcome a new deck, otherwise there's some tips. We also have some spreads, and then we get into the cards. So I'm going to just keep this sort of open here so that I can reference it to the side. And I don't know, I'm guessing I'm not going to know. I definitely don't know who this is, but I don't know all of these figures, I'm sure. So this will be a nice reference as we go through. I'm not going to read the entire guidebook. I don't think that's entirely fair, but I am going to share little snippets, I think, as we go through. So first we have Akalandeshvari, and I'm actually really excited that there is a pronunciation guide in the guidebook. So let me try that again. Akalandeshvari. Akalandeshvari. So I was pretty close, and she is absolutely beautiful. I'm really noticing all the gold crackle around her throat, and I'm going to zoom us in just a little bit more. All the gold crackle around her throat is really, really pretty. It says, in Hindu lore, Akalandeshvari represents the transformative power of change. And it goes on from there as far as your meaning for the card goes. But it does say specifically here in the myth section, I was surprised how little has been written about this goddess given how fascinating she is. Even her name is symbolic. Broken up into its parts, it's pretty obvious reference to a goddess, Akila, universe, and Ishwari, sovereign. But the word Akalanda can also be translated as both always broken and never not broken. Okay, I have heard of her. I've heard of, maybe it's in a different deck I have, it must be, but I've heard a reference to the goddess of never not broken, and this must be the same one. Really exciting. And it says that this particular image of the goddess was inspired by kintsugi, which I've talked about before, the Japanese art of repairing cracks in pottery with gold filling. And I love that because the idea of kintsugi really brings about that concept of where we have cracks, we can fill them in with light or with gold. And I'm going to interrupt this actually and share a deck that I have that's based entirely on this concept just because I think it's relevant and because I just want to. If you're particularly touched by the concept of kintsugi or filling in broken cracks of pottery with gold, you might also really enjoy this Aurum Lenormand deck, which would obviously pair beautifully with this deck just at first glance. This is a Lenormand deck actually by Melissa Wotherspoon, who you may know from her other deck creations. But as you can see, these golden threads run all through this particular deck, which I think is really special and unique. But look, I mean, come on, they would pair beautifully, right? Right, okay. I just had to share that because it felt really relevant. Okay, I'm already off track and we're only one card in, so let's keep going. But I love that concept of never not broken and of her association with the transformative power of change. I think there's a lot you can work with just right there. A lot of depth already in that first card, and I'm not always drawn to, in fact, probably the reason I didn't pick this up is because I'm not very often drawn to oracle decks where there's no keywords. Like, this would be the kind of deck where I would like to see this name, Akalanda Deshvari, and also underneath that maybe the keyword change or the transformative power of change or never not broken or something to inspire me or to remind me what the meaning of the card is. But I will say that already on this first card, I already feel like there's just a ton of depth, and that's really exciting to me. Okay, next card. Amaterasu, and we still have a pronunciation guide. So it wasn't just that one first figure. So it wasn't just that one first figure, but here pronounced Amaterasu. Amaterasu. So I think I'm saying that right. So this is the beautiful and shining Amaterasu reminds us that when difficult situations force us to retreat from the world, we are not only hurting ourselves, but those around us. Okay, so it tells us a little bit about the meaning of the card. So here again, we're talking about being even when we're forced to retreat from the world, that we're not only hurting ourselves, but those around us, that we have gifts to give, even if they feel hidden. Come out and face the world. And then it tells us about Amaterasu's story here a bit. And she is a sun goddess from the Shinto religion. And it goes on to tell a little bit about her story. Now, I really love that. If we're going to have these divine feminine figures or figures that are common in mythologies, I like to know at least enough to sort of whet my appetite. And I definitely feel like I get that in this guidebook. Ooh, Athena, look at her with the owl and the universe in the owl. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Athena reminds us to pay attention to our rational side and think problems through rather than act impulsively. Athena's got a very Queen of Swordsy kind of energy to me, so that really works. Baba Yaga. Oh my goodness. Baba Yaga is a fierce, independent, and powerful witch. If you come across her, do your best to keep your wits about you. Come with good intentions and a strong backbone, and she might bless you with a gift. Goes on to talk about Baba Yaga's myth and the story of Vasilisa. I might be saying that wrong, but that story, I dove really deep into that story when reading Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is definitely a book I highly recommend if you are drawn to really diving deep into sort of divine feminine archetypes, but also healing from that perspective. It's really beautiful. Bastet. Now she is, I believe, Egyptian? Yeah, Egyptian. Bastet was an aspect of an older lioness goddess who seems to have split in two, becoming Bastet and Sekhmet. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, interesting. So there's a lot more in the myth section. As you can see, we get like This whole section is all about her myth. But for her meaning, it says that she may be known for being a fun-loving, gentle, motherly figure, but she has a strong sense of justice that will make itself known. Don't underestimate those with a kind demeanor. They can be the toughest of characters. And you have this sort of external, sort of beautiful silhouette, but deep inside is of what looks like a feminine or woman figure, but then deep inside is this skull of a cat, which is super cool looking. I love that. Here we have Bridget, Celtic goddess. And she is originally an earth goddess believed to be the spirit in plants, animals, and streams. She eventually became a triple goddess, the goddess of healing, poetry, and the creative arts, as well as the goddess of fire. And so it says here, Bridget brings fire, inspiration, and energy. Though you may want to get swept away by all your newfound motivation, remember, too, Bridget's roots as an earth goddess. Keep your feet on the ground and set manageable goals. Love that. And I love that we've got this Triskeli up above her and the antlers and the candle, which Bridget's flame is a reference. So there's a lot actually happening in the artwork, even though it looks a little bit on the minimal side. There's so much happening. Oh my gosh, the magic. Can I just pause for a second? Okay, the magic and sort of really intense witchy feel to these images. They feel really potent and intense in a really cool way. Really excited about that. And I don't know if I pointed out the card back. Yeah, I think I did. But I love this sort of lamp with the eye in the center. Really cool. Okay, let's go back to Caradwen, who looks like a badass, as she should, in this image, which I love. I love that her cauldron is here. I'm loving the fierce look on her face. Caradwen is associated with shape-shifting, magical power, and inspiration, especially with words, and it goes on from there. According to medieval Welsh mythology, Caradwen is a powerful magic worker who used her cauldron, Awen, to brew potions. Okay, I don't think Awen was the name of her cauldron. I could be wrong about that. Somebody please feel free to chime in down below. But I did some study of Welsh mythology, and reading the original stories in the Mabinogion, Awen is what she was brewing in her cauldron, as I recall. I'm hoping that it talks about a potion, but I believe Awen was a reference to the potion of knowledge. So Awen being sort of spiritual knowledge that she was brewing. Again, I could be wrong, so anybody who knows the fable well, please feel free to chime in and correct me down below, or share your gifts. That's such a little nitpicky thing, but she's very much associated with her cauldron and with brewing this potion, and then an ensuing chase between her and Gwion, and a lot of shape-shifting that happened throughout all of that, which is why she's associated with shape-shifting, as well as power and inspiration. Alwyn is often a term we use as like divine inspiration, or that magical spark of knowledge. Anyways, really beautiful image. I just kind of went on a bit of a tangent there. Here we have Circe. And for all of you who, I was talking about Circe when I did my Tarot of Delphi walkthrough. If you haven't seen that yet, I will try to remember to link it up in the cards. But Circe came up in the images for the Tarot of Delphi a few times. And I mentioned that I've been seeing a book with the same name circulating and hearing good things about it. And so many of you commented on that video and said I definitely need to read Circe. So it is currently on my Amazon Kindle wish list. So as soon as I have some bandwidth in my TBR pile, I will definitely be picking up Circe because it sounds really interesting, but that's just a bit of a sideline. So what it says about Circe here in the guidebook: Circe has a calm inner strength that allows her to let in relationships that give her joy and let go of them when they no longer serve her. Her quiet life spent among nature helps her find this inner peace and power. In the ancient Greek myth, Circe is summarily described as an evil, lonely enchantress of men. Her actions, however, tell a different story. And if that intrigues you, you're probably going to definitely want to look into her fable more or read this book, because I'm really excited that Anabelle has taken the time to really give us these summaries of these figures' stories. And I like that the figures represented so far feel incredibly powerful. I know I keep saying that, but I'm really getting a really intense sense of power from this deck in the best possible way. It's, I mean, dare I say, probably one of the witchiest decks I've felt that really intense witchy energy from in a long time, and this is really cool. Okay, Diana. Oh, she's a cat. Diana is fiercely independent, a shape-shifting goddess who is as likely to appear as an animal as she is a woman. She embodies a wildness, a desire to run free in the woods and never be caught or held in one place for too long. Diana is the Roman goddess of the moon, the hunt, and childbirth. Yeah, I think I'm used to seeing Diana represented as the huntress, and not so much here in like a cat form. And I think this is a really interesting choice and makes the card almost more memorable in a way, because I feel like I've seen Diana so many times in the same kind of archetype, and this really shows a different side of her, which I think is really great. Frau Hulda. Here's one that I haven't heard of at all, I don't think. Frau, and then Holda. Okay, so I said that right. Frau Holda's rampages across the night sky were so legendary they endured even when those who disliked her attempted to erase them from memory. I don't know what that's all about. Let's see. The goddess Holda shows up in Germanic and Scandinavian myths as a protector of women, a spinner, and a leader of wild hunts across the skies. She predates the Norse pantheon and is thought to have been a supreme goddess in early paganism of the region. And goes on from there. It looks like she's got some connection to the underworld. Yeah, again, I'm feeling a lot of power from the figures chosen so far. We'll see if there's a softness that comes through as well, but so far it feels very intense and fierce in its own way. So now we have Freya. Freya is an open book, a free thinker, completely unafraid to be herself despite the persecution she may face. She makes no secret of her love of the finer things in life and of passion, and she refuses to be shamed for it. In Norse mythology, there are two major races of gods, the Vanir, who are fertility gods, and the Aesir, I might be saying that wrong, guys, Odin, Loki, Thor, etc., who are more warlike, honor-bound gods. Freya is of the Vanir, and man, does she show it. And it goes on from there. Oh my gosh. Okay, so really have this, she does have a status as a fertility goddess, and it kind of goes on from there. Really interesting, but there's a feminine power, even in the imagery and the way that she's shown. Really cool. Hecate. Now, Hecate, this is interesting. So she looks, in this image, she is a representation of the triple goddess, but I'm used to Hecate in artwork often appearing a little bit older, more like in the crone aspect of her, rather than in the sort of more maiden or mother phase that we see here. I also do wish that in the triple faces we can see in this card, that we could see a clear delineation between maidenhood, motherhood, and cronehood. Yeah, so it says Hecate is associated with the outcasts and the misfits, a goddess of the underworld. Hecate carries two torches to light the way in the darkness and teaches us to see and love the shadow within us, the parts of ourselves we try to hide or push away. Triple goddess with three bodies, it talks about in Greek myth. There's more here. I might need to do some more diving into Hecate, so it could be that she's not so much associated with maiden, mother, crone, but definitely she is a triple goddess, so I'd be interested to learn a little bit more, particularly to kind of fuse that with the depiction we see here. Hel. I'm so glad Hel is in here because she is just awesome. Hel's grim determination to get what she wants while well within her rights is one of the key factors that led to the destruction of the Norse pantheon. If we are to learn from the gods' mistakes, Hel might be a reminder to be wary of possessiveness. Very interesting. And then, of course, we get to learn more about her story. But she is very much a goddess of death, as I understand it, and of the underworld. Again, we have that sort of deep, sort of shadowy energy. She's described as having half the body of a young woman and half that of a corpse, which I do think we see depicted in this artwork. And she's holding a skull in her hand with Hagalaz and, is it Urus, I think, engraved on it? It's hard for me to tell, but hopefully you guys looking at it in the viewfinder on the bigger screen can see that. Really cool. Okay, I love all the gold on Isis's image here. So Isis, despite having every reason to give in to grief and loneliness, Isis's persistence, focus, and strength kept the cosmos in balance. There is always a way to transform a seemingly terrible situation into something that empowers yourself and others. Oh, and Isis is an Egyptian goddess, one of the ancient family of 9 Egyptian deities, the Ennead of Heliopolis. And she was one of the most complicated and widely worshipped deities, the epitome of a mother, wife, mourner, healer, and magic worker. Oh my gosh. Kali. You see what I mean? Like, there's just all these, like, really primal forces of divine feminine power. And I think this is really interesting to me. I don't think I have it any longer, the Divine Feminine Oracle, which was a mass market deck. And that had a lot of really cross-cultural feminine, like, sort of deities or really strong feminine forces from mythology, that sort of thing. But it had that softer, more nurturing feel. And I feel like this is the kind of deck that's going to hold you accountable in a really powerful way. I definitely think this would be wonderful, just from what I've seen so far, for like shadowier, like holding yourself accountable kind of messages. So shadow work or that sort of just personal growth stuff where you really want to be taken to task in a way and like held to your goals for yourself and living in alignment with your highest truth. Seeing goddesses like Baba Yaga and Kali and these other sort of deities or representations from mythologies that are strong feminine forces of power, at least in my practice, this definitely has a place. And I think I really underestimated it when I initially saw the Kickstarter because I'm really impressed with the potency that's coming through. In any case, let's read about Kali. And I love that she is depicted here powerfully and full tongue out action, veil of, or garland of skulls, the whole bit. It's exactly works for me. Kali is well known as the goddess of death, but is also the goddess of motherly love and protection as well as sexuality. The destruction and death of old ways can be difficult, but out of the ashes, new ways can emerge. There are many origin stories for Kali. One comes from the Devi Mahatmya, written between 400 and 600 CE, and starts with an awful demon named Raktabija. The word Raktabija can be translated as blood seed, an apt name considering he has been blessed by Brahma so that every time a drop of his blood hits the ground, he'll get stronger, and the blood will produce another demon just like himself. Unfortunately, Raktabija focuses his efforts on being incredibly annoying and making everyone's lives miserable. After ticking off enough people and gods to create a veritable army of himself from fallen blood, the gods decide to regroup. They decide they need someone stronger than themselves. Together, they combine all of their Shakti, or divine power, to create one supreme goddess of destruction, Kali. And it goes on from there, and I love the way that the mythologies are written in here. You get just a taste, but it's written in very plain speak. Like, I love that it says, ticking off people, and, the language here is very approachable and not, it's not overly academic sounding, so it's very relatable, if that makes any sense. And I think that's one of the things that I feel like is being done really well in this deck, is that these divine feminine figures are being made accessible in a way. Their stories are being made relatable to modern life in a way. And I think that's been done really brilliantly just from the bits I've read so far. Lady of the Lake. Oh, love it. Nimue. So Lady of the Lake pronounced Nimue, which is interesting. So it looks like maybe Anabelle meant to title this card Nimue, or decided to give it the name Lady of the Lake, even though it's referring to Nimue, but interesting, hey? As Nimue, the Lady of the Lake grows in power. She also grows in confidence and gains the surprisingly difficult skill of setting and keeping boundaries. It goes on from there, but that's awesome. In the Arthurian legends, there are multiple ladies of the lake, but our subject is Nimue, who was the lover of the great magician Merlin. There are many versions of her character. Mine mostly comes from the post-Vulgati/Mallory tales. So interesting that she goes on from there. So she's going to tell a specific version of the story that will make it relatable to the meaning of the card around boundaries and such. So I'm excited to read more on that one. Lilith. Oh my gosh. See, again, I feel like so far this selection feels just very powerful. Okay, sorry. For better or worse, Lilith refuses to back down to authority, yes, but instead forges her own path despite all consequences. For this, she is demonized by some and venerated by others. Lilith challenges us to think deeply about where we must take a strong and unyielding stance. It seems as if there's no clear consensus on who exactly Lilith is. Her name or variants of it show up across many major Jewish and Christian religious texts as a prominent and terrifying owl-like demon, which is the reason that she's depicted with an owl skull on her head here. Oh, interesting. She might be the person referred to in Genesis 1:27 as Adam's first wife. The alphabet of, and it goes on, oh my gosh, it goes on from there. I don't want to read every single one, but you guys, I'm really excited about this. I did not expect to be so excited about this. Okay, what is with Maleficent in here? We're not just talking Disney Maleficent, are we? Are we? It is. Oh my God. Okay, so here's what I love. So there's a sort of irreverent approach to the topic of witches of legend in this deck, and I am here for it. I feel like too often divine feminine decks sort of lock themselves into what they kind of are allowed to, I guess, include. And this just shows that if this is an inspiring figure, if this figure represents an empowered witch archetype or one that can be helpful in the deck, Anabelle's like, yeah, we're including her. And I think that's really awesome. It just kind of shows that Anabelle had a vision for this deck and was not afraid to think outside the box in a way, and I love that. Because here it says, Maleficent represents the emotional struggle between trust and betrayal. Interestingly, if you've watched the movie Maleficent, and there's a newer one, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, I think it's called, it really gives a lot of depth to Maleficent as a character, and she's actually somebody whose story, when you start to put all these different pieces together from the later movies and the earlier one, just starts to paint a certain picture of a type of archetype of the witch that I find really fascinating and interesting. Anyway, it talks about her tale reminds us of that actions arising from anger or a desire for vengeance often do not lead where we think they will. We are all imperfect, and we will no doubt encounter thoughtlessness and be thoughtless ourselves. It's better to remain kind and open-hearted when we can. So it says she appears as an unnamed evil fairy in the folk tale Sleeping Beauty, the first known account of which was published by Charles Perrault in 1697. Much like the Disney movie, the original tale didn't show much of her nuanced character. It goes on from there. Does she reference the movies here? I'm just seeing. I found that a French woman, Madame d'Aulnoy, who incidentally coined the term fairy tale, took the character and wrote another tale for her in the late 1600s entitled The White Doe. The tale opens with a queen distraught because she hasn't given birth to any children for her king. Luckily for her, a friendly and trusting crab happens upon her and takes her to the fantastic fairy palace. There the crab reveals itself to be the fairy of spring and rallies the other fairies together to bless the queen with a child named Desiree. The queen decides to invite all the sweet fairies to her daughter's christening, except, of course, for the poor fairy of spring. The uninvited crab crashes the party anyway, indignant, looking for all the world like she's got murder on her mind. The fairies manage to talk her down a bit, but she's still a bit crabby. Oh my god, the pun is excellent in here. She forgoes death for a gentler punishment and places a curse on the baby. Grave misfortune will come to the child if any sunlight touches her before she turns 15. So it's clear that these two stories were obviously merged for the Disney film Sleeping Beauty. Really interesting. I now totally want to read The White Doe and learn a little bit more about that version of the tale. There's more in the book here, but again, we do need to move on. Still, really cool. Love that she's in here. So next we have Marie Laveau. A compassionate person focused on healing, Marie Laveau is a testament to the lasting effects of overcoming adversity with grace and kindness. She reminds us to be proud of our roots. Through her celebration of her diverse background, Laveau was able to bring people together. So she was not a mythical witch, but an actual person. She lived in New Orleans from 1801 to 1888 and was often, 1881, and was often referred to as the Voodoo Queen. Laveau was the daughter of a free black woman of mixed African and Native American descent and a French nobleman. Before she became famous, she worked as a hairdresser for the upper echelons of society. I keep wanting to read this whole thing, you guys, and I really need to not, but I mean, this is really cool. I love that she is in here. It goes on it goes on to talk about how more about what she's associated with, talks about her strong sense of compassion for those who were sick or condemned, and it talks about ways in which she offerings are left for her today, which is really interesting. Okay, I am excited about that. Now we have Medea. Medea is intelligent, skillful, and passionate, but she also reminds us of the pitfalls of getting too lost in unhealthy love. So she is a character from Greek mythology, a demigod daughter of the god king Aeetes and the granddaughter of the sun god Helios, and goes on about her story. Really beautiful card. Medusa, yes! Throughout the centuries, Medusa's visage has been a symbol of protection and feminine power not to be crossed. If her card is pulled, she's a magical talisman that will ward off any evil coming your way. Talks about Medusa's story, of course. I really find her to be a powerful archetype to work with, for sure. Morgan Le Fay. And we had Nimue, so I like that Morgan Le Fay is also in here. A complex character, she brings both an inspiring message of persistence, resilience, and strength despite traumatic events, and a warning against the pitfalls of following ambition at any cost. So she is from the Legends of King Arthur. I love the moon phases coming out of her. I love that a lot of these figures look like we're seeing or peeking into them from the spirit world. Really cool. The Morrigan has the raven or the crow here. A fierce war goddess, and pulling her card may mean there are battles or challenges to overcome. Goes on from there. An enigmatic Irish war goddess, a powerful sorceress, and a shapeshifter. Love this image of the Morgan. Newt. Okay, so this wasn't Newt. So Newt. It says pronounced nut. I thought it was newt. Somebody tell me down below. I could have swore it was newt, but maybe it is nut. I could be wrong here, totally. I think sometimes we see a word and we get it in our head how it's pronounced, and then it's like really hard to shake. When it comes to her dream of motherhood, Nut doesn't let even the ruler of the gods hold her back. She has no problem asking for support to get what she wants. She is a reminder to be open to help when it's offered and to be strong enough to ask for it if needed. She is one of the oldest Egyptian goddesses and is part of the Egyptian creation story. Oh my gosh, look at the universe in her hair here. So beautiful. Ah, there we are. Nyx. Oh, I said it was Newt or Nyx. In my head, that's what was happening. Nyx is the embodiment of ancient strength and wisdom. She may not enjoy the limelight or hanging around with crowds of friends and followers, but those she does care about, she protects with a fierceness that can make the king of the gods quake in his sandals. Pull her card and know that you have someone supporting you from the shadows. And she is the primordial goddess of the night sky in the Greek pantheon, a daughter of chaos, and one of the oldest of all the gods and goddesses. Oshun. Oshun reminds us that water can take on any shape and flow with any path. Water has the ability to heal, to bring life, and to destroy it, to carve out its own path in even the most stubborn terrain. Remember that being adaptable and embracing change is a strength, not a weakness. Be open to whatever life throws at you rather than resistant. I love this. Looks like a bee underneath her here. Really beautiful. I want to see this reference to the bee. I really do. She's associated, it looks like, with water, fertility, love, luxury, and pleasure. Also seen as being fiercely protective, the nurturer and savior of humankind. Talks about associations with water. So she is, with the rise of the transatlantic slave trade, worship of Oshun and the Yoruba Orisha spread to the Americas. She's well known, if by other names, such as Oksum and Ochen, in countries like Brazil and Cuba. I probably really slaughtered the pronunciation. She is beautiful. I love this image. I love that she's in the water here. Pele, who is, of course, our goddess of fire and volcano. Pele represents a passion and energy that may threaten to consume you and your relationships. Treat this newfound passion with respect, but don't let it overwhelm you. Pay close attention to the effect it has on those around you. Ask yourself if the energy you are embracing is having a positive effect on your life. She's said to be intense and fiery as the volcanoes she creates, a passionate and capricious goddess who governs Hawaii's Kilauea, which is the big volcano, one of the big volcanoes in Hawaii. She's beautiful. I love that she seems to be made of lava. Love that. Persephone. So oftentimes Persephone is depicted softer. I'm curious about how it's addressed here. Originally, the Greek goddess of spring focused on bringing life and color to the world each year. Persephone had no idea she would someday also reign in the land of the dead. She has the confidence and resolve to take on her newfound duality in stride, however, and carves out a new role and life for herself. Love that. Santa Muerte. Santa Muerte brings a shocking end to negative influences and a stark reminder that our time on earth is short. Goes on from there. She is the personification of death and is worshipped by millions of devotees across Mexico and southwestern U.S., despite the fact that it is condemned by the Catholic Church. I didn't know. I mean, it makes sense. To those who worship her, she is a powerful and mysterious figure who works miracles, heals, and protects her followers, even as she reminds them of their mortality. I love that she's holding an hourglass and a scythe here as a figure of death and as a reminder that our time is limited. Saraswati. Pronounced Saraswati or Sarasvati. I've heard it both ways. I think I've said it both ways too. Saraswati doesn't limit herself when it comes to inspiration, and she reminds us to embrace our creativity and follow wherever it leads. She's probably one of the most creative and multi-talented Hindu goddesses, and Saraswati is known as the goddess of knowledge, music, dance, and art. Again, there's so much more to this guidebook, but that gives you a feel for her. I love that she's holding a paintbrush and a ukulele, it looks like, or some kind of stringed instrument. So beautiful. Sea Witch. Is this Ursula? I'm going to die. Is this Ursula? Yes. A woman of cool and composed judgment, the Sea Witch reminds us to consider our desires rationally. Knowing ourselves enough to discover what really makes us feel fulfilled takes patience and can change over time. If you've ever read the original Hans Christian Andersen version of The Little Mermaid, you've probably been horrified. It may have been the most depressing happy ending in existence. The Little Mermaid does fall in love with the prince, as she does in the Disney version, and saves him from drowning. It goes on from there to tell more about her story. I won't spoil it. In case you haven't read the original Hans Christian Andersen version, you should, to have a deeper understanding of the complexity of the Sea Witch, for sure. Here we have Sekhmet. Sekhmet can be a warning against letting emotion take the reins in any situation. Interesting. A goddess of both destruction and protection, of pharaohs in particular, she's usually depicted with the head of a lion and a sun disk behind her head. But here we have sort of a skull of a... Is that a skull of a lion? Does it say? She was apparently associated with the cat goddess Bastet, possibly seen as the darker, more destructive side. Interesting. Okay. Selene. Here's another goddess that I think I've often seen depicted in a softer way. A beautiful, powerful, and important goddess who seems to have lost herself in an unnecessary and unhealthy relationship based solely on looks and the memory of happiness. Oh, interesting. There are many goddesses connected to the moon in Greek mythology, but Selene is distinct in that she's described as actually being the moon herself. Interesting. I love that. She's so pretty. Okay. And then we have Tiamat. Tiamat represents a challenge we all face throughout our lives, the feeling that we are being pulled in different directions by people or situations that are important to us. Unable to prioritize one direction over another. Listen to advice, but let your decisions on which path to take come from within. Tiamat, a Babylonian goddess, is the primordial goddess of all salt water, and with her partner Abzu, the god of fresh water, she creates the cosmos. Oh my gosh, you guys, let's zoom out. Let's take a look overall. But this is so beautiful. Circe and Isis and Medusa, all of these figures are coming to us in this deck in a real powerful way. This deck shuffles really beautiful. It's probably a 350 GSM, but there's not a ton of cards in here. I don't think it says how many. 34. There's 34 cards in the deck. So it probably is a fairly decently thick cardstock. It feels substantial in the hand. It shuffles well. Now, decks that are gilded like this, I don't know if you can tell, it does already have just the tiniest bow from just that first shuffle. At least I suspect that's what did it. Decks with gilding do tend to hold a bow a little bit stronger than decks that are not gilded. I just think it's the foiling that tends to sort of hold the bow a little bit, but I will always shuffle the way that I shuffle. It is what it is. This deck is really, really beautiful. I'm feeling really called to not do a sample reading with this deck. I apologize to anybody that disappoints, but I just feel like this deck is already calling me for deeper work, and I feel like I need to spend a little time with it, getting to know it and the archetypes that are in here. But I definitely feel like if I want a message from divine feminine power, like this just feels so stunning to me. And again, this was not on my radar. I barely noticed the limited color palette. And what I mean by that is that I'm normally a little bit turned off by decks that don't have lots and lots of bright color. But in this deck, it feels correct. It feels like almost like I'm seeing these images, like I'm smoke scrying, for example, in incense smoke, and these images are just coming to me out of the smoke. It feels deeply magical to look at and to hold, and I've barely scratched the surface. I think this would be a really amazing deck for pulling small draws, like one card working with it, or maybe no more than 3, but I would probably work with this deck one card at a time. This would be excellent for full moon or dark moon draws to really connect with a particular message. And it would pair really beautifully with decks like Tarot of the Crone or the Dark Goddess Tarot, or I would pair this with the Deviant Moon Tarot or the Reclaim Oracle or any other deck where I feel like I would be drawn to do deeper work for sure. Really stands, I think, in a space all its own. Again, a lot of the times with divine feminine decks, we get this very sort of soft, mothery, nurtury energy, which I will admit I absolutely love and adore. But there's not a lot of decks that really slide themselves into this space of real powerful divine feminine archetypes. And if you want to work with divine feminine energy and you want something, especially you want something to sort of counterbalance some of the softer, more delicate approach to this topic, this could be a really nice counterbalance. And in fact, I could see if you did have one of those other decks that brings in the soft or the lighter version to pair this with it side by side. In fact, let's see what that might look like. Okay, so I just grabbed my Legendary Ladies deck, which definitely takes that soft, gentle approach for sure. So let's put these two decks side by side. The art style could not be any more different, but I just kind of want to see if they really do feel like they balance one another. So here we have Hsai Wang Mu for Renewal and Amaterasu, Athena and Marie Laveau, Oshun here. And see, this is what I mean. Look at this Oshun versus the Oshun in this deck. I just have to. In fact, I'm not even sure. I'm going to say something probably somewhat controversial here in a moment. When I see these two decks side by side, right away, here's my feeling. This feels powerful and it feels honoring. This suddenly feels a little too playful, a little too kitschy, a little not honoring. And I don't think that's why this deck was created. I think this art style was meant to make these figures approachable, but I almost feel like with this in my hands now, I almost can't take this seriously, which is super interesting. I did not expect to have that reaction when I pulled this deck. But like, again, Sekhmet versus... Because I think this matters, right? Especially if you've been having a hard time connecting with Divine Goddess energy. I mean, look at the difference in these depictions of Sekhmet. And this, to me, feels more true to my own experience of working with the goddess. This feels more true, not Sekhmet specifically, but just divine feminine energy. To me, it feels more like this than like this. And yeah, I think I want to try another comparison here. Hold on. Okay, so I just grabbed my favorite goddess oracle to date. Now these two, I feel like these two both have a reverence to them. Yes, these both feel like they're honoring the power, the strength. Here's Amaterasu here. Amaterasu is right on top. Okay, so here's Amaterasu in this deck and Amaterasu here. They both feel deeply honoring. I don't feel the same sort of dissonance I felt when I put the legendary ladies next to this deck. And I think that might be one of my issues, right? Is that sometimes I feel like these decks, these topics, when we address the divine feminine, we lose some of that power. And I don't feel that loss in either of these. And I'm really excited about this because, again, I was like, well, I don't need another divine feminine deck. But actually, there's really not a lot that are done as skillfully as I feel like these two are done. And I could definitely see working with these two decks together to get a combined message. I think this could be really powerful. I feel like this one does produce more of that mothery, but not always. I don't feel like if I'm being honest, I feel like we get a good balance in this deck, whereas this one definitely leans into the intensity. But I mean, like, look at these together. I do think these work. I really do think these work together. Let's take a look. Now that I'm kind of thinking about it, let's try another combination. So this one, this is the Goddess Tarot by Sophia Marashinsky and Hirana Janto. Let's take a look briefly at the Weavers, because I think the Weavers and this deck could also play really nicely together. Yeah, I think these would work really well together as well. Both Oracle decks. But here we have not any historical figures. We have all new archetypes, really new to us, archetypes here and here. But these decks feel like they have similar potency to me. Yeah, I could see those together. Okay, as far as tarot pairings, I'm just kind of rolling with it now because my mind is kind of racing about how I might work with these. Okay, let's see how this deck would compare next to Ellen Lorenzi Prince's decks, because I think it could really shine next to these. So here is the Tarot of the Crone. Oh yeah, there's no question. There's no question. Look at this. Like, these would work really well together. Yes. Yes, I definitely see this one in this pairing. I think this could be really, really good. Yeah. Yeah, no question. Okay, so these work really well. I'm kind of just doing my own thing now. Let's take a look at the Dark Goddess Tarot as well. See, and here again, I feel like we get a lot of power. Very different artwork. I don't know that artistically, I kind of feel like this goes better with Tarot of the Crone, but I feel like message-wise, these could work really, really well together. The Norns and Pele, Lorelei and Amaterasu, Sedna and Marie Laveau, Lethe and Oshun, Vesta and Sekhmet, Kali and Medusa. And you do have this possibility of drawing a double of the same archetype, which could be really interesting in a reading. Okay. Really excited about this deck. And again, this was one that I really honestly wasn't sure about. I'm really excited that it ended up coming to me because I do feel like it's got the capacity to do some really nice deep work, and I'm so grateful to the generous soul who sent this my way so that I could check it out, because it really was not on my radar at all. So that, my friends, is the Witches of Legend Oracle deck by Anabelle Lewis. This little guidebook is also quite a treat. I feel like I want this. So that, my friends, is the Witches of Legend Oracle deck by Anabelle Lewis. This is such a special deck. I'm really excited it ended up coming into my hands. Thank you again to the generous soul who sent this my way. I really genuinely appreciate it. So excited I get to work with this. I think there's a lot of depth and intensity in the best possible way to this, and I like that it kind of crosses the line of what we normally see as popular or common in a divine feminine style deck. I love that. I love that this sort of breaks the mold for what we may expect going forward from these types of decks as well, which I really appreciate. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me. Please do remember to click the like button if you enjoyed this walkthrough or you found value in it. Subscribe if you're new here, and don't forget to click that little notification bell. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and sharing this time with me. I genuinely appreciate that you take some of that valuable time and spend it here on this channel. It means so much. So I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day wherever you might be, and thank you again so much for joining me. And may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.